If you ask me to define Airfix by one of its kits, this would be the kit I chose. It's a classic kit and probably the mother of all their classic kits.
So we don't have decals, but we do have flags, and they give you two sets of flags, and different releases of this kit you get them in different formats. But you've got the signal flags, which we just saw in the instructions. They're printed on paper, so you cut them out, fold them over your thread, and glue them into position. So yeah, nice and easy, straightforward. I didn't rig mine previously, so I never did that. So that's something I'd like to try and do this time. Now, it's actually quite thick paper, so you should be able to form some fluttery creases into it without any problem. And then these are actually thinner paper than the signal flags. I would say a third thinner at least. And we've got our various flags. They're a good size. The print is all right. It's not amazing, but at least we've not got black lines all over it. It is printed nicely. So we've got our white ensign, we've got our English flag, we've got the banner, and we've got the Union flag as well, which of course is called a jack when it's on a ship. So that's a Union jack, not a Union flag, although most people call it a Union Jack all the time, even though almost all of the time it's called a Union Jack. It's incorrect. It's a flag. The only other paperwork in here is, and I always quite like looking at these things, this is for complaining about your kit. They don't put those in anymore, but there seems to be three of them. They're sort of held together by a punch. I guess it was to make them easy to rip off, and someone was putting them into the box. I ended up with three of them in this one. But on the back, it says the Airfix range includes over 300 constant scale kits. Well, that's certainly not that big anymore. And among them are aircraft, modern and veteran cars, warships and classic ships, fighting vehicles, historical figures, rolling stock and trackside series, 00 figures and museum models. Airfix also produced Motor Ace. I have no idea what that is. I'm guessing it's some form of slot car thing. Home car electric racing set, so Scalextrics, I think, don't know. And accessories. New artist painting by numbers. Better Builder. I think that was a former Lego, wasn't it? Better Builder. Like plastic building blocks, building sets, and a wide range of toys for the modeller. I didn't know modelers had toys. Published Airfix magazine. For full details of each range, see separate catalogues. Right, okay. So, a little bit of advertising there. So, we will now recycle these, but yeah, always nice to read these old vintage things, I think. So the next things to look at is our shrouds, and what the instructions are calling rat lines. Both terms are not incorrect. And what we get is, it's quite an odd material. It's really clever. I don't know what they did with it, but it's a cotton thread that's then been given a coating, and it looks just like it's been tarred. And you cut those out and put those on your model, and they're going to look absolutely superb, because they are woven like the real thing is knotted. You know, you've got the rat lines, which is this going up, and then you've got the foot ropes which go across, which turn them into shrouds, because it's just a rat line until it's turned into a shroud. Basically how it works. So you've got all this. It's all pre-positioned. So all you've got to do is cut that out along that edge, so it's nice and neat. cut that at the halfway point, so you've got something to wrap around the model, and then cut these so that you can then glue them behind the dead eyes. And it'll look superb, I promise you, it will look really, really good. It's such a good idea. It's better than when they put the cotton in and you had to make them yourself. Yeah, and I actually think it's probably better than the photo etch versions you can get. Now, I have some photo etch on its way of these, but it's not because I want to use the photo etch shrouds, it's because I want the photo etch dead eyes and ropes. But yeah, I think this is a brilliant idea, and yeah, it's a shame they don't include that in the modern version. If you get the vintage classic now, you get thread, you make your own using a little device. It's very, very clever, but it ain't going to look as good as this. Now, I did say we would comment on fixed rigging being black. So usually you see modelers depict shrouds as black. Now, they were permanently rigged, and because they were permanently rigged, they were tar covered, and tar is black. So that's the logic behind it. But actually, the tarred ropes, over time, they fade to a brown, and the seawater and the sea air does that to them, and they sort of oxidize and they go brown. So actually, it's much more accurate for you to do your fixed rigging in brown. Or when you do wooden model ships, quite often they'll supply you brown instead of black. Depends on the brand. So you could paint these brown if you wanted, and that would be more authentic. She would have gone into battle at Trafalgar with them most likely looking brown rather than freshly tarred black. Don't know, wasn't there, but that's what I would guess. But for looking smart as a display piece, I think the eye expects black, and so black looks better. So personally, I'd be leaving these black, but I might do some of my other fixed rigging in a dark brown rather than a black. Don't know yet. We will see when we come to do it. Right, we're going to start looking at the plastic, and we're going to start with our decks. So this is the lower gun deck where we add all these pillars. We can see the holes are nicely drilled out for us. We've got the gratings in there, so you'd want to paint them a natural wood, and then the rest of it, the framework, is a dark wood with our cannonballs picked out in black. We've got a section of raised deck, so that actually, for me, what you want to do is sand that flush and then pick out individual planks with masking tape. And we'll do that come the time. They've only done a small section there, but at certain angles you could see a little bit more than what they've done. Not massively, but a small amount. So it's worth going a little bit beyond there as well. As we look at the front, the part's quite bowed, by the way, but when you lock that into the ship and glue it in place, it should straighten itself out. There is some sink in this front section here. You can see two big whopping sink marks because of these ejector pins here. So for me, I would be removing those ribs anyway, painting in the planks individually, and that gives us a chance to fill that and smooth that and level it out. There's our toilets, our heads there, and the grating is a little bit blocked up with the plastic. So not quite sure. You might want to try and cut them out and replace them with plastic cardstock, or if we can thin this down a little bit, it might just open it up, and then you can get in there with a light knife and just scrape it out. Not sure, we'll have to have a look at that come the time. The moulding is a bit scrappy around there anyway, it's a bit lumpy and what have you, so it all wants a little bit of a tidy up anyway. But fundamentally, not bad, nice and crisp around where the detail is. The grating, again, it looks better from the underside than it does from the upper side because of how it's come out of the mould. So we've got the thick edge. If every part that comes out of a mould is slightly triangular to allow it to be released. and that's more exaggerated on older kits than newer kits. So what we've got is the thick edge showing up. So if we can get in there and thin that out, that if that's possible. Otherwise, we might want to replace it in some way. But when painted up, it won't look too bad actually. So that's the lower deck. Our next deck to look at is the main deck, which is the most of this deck is what you see. There's another deck that goes on there, and the forecastle deck, and then so this sort of sits like that on there, like that. So that's how you see it. And you've got the front bulkhead. So again, it's raised decks, but the planking width is good because it's big, thick oak planks, and there were fairly long planks as well. So this should be sorted out okay. There's a lot of scratching. I'm not sure what that is, but there's a lot of imperfections in the plastic. So sanding all that smooth or scraping it smooth and getting it, painting it, and then painting in planks is the way to go. You've got the wooden beams. These are two beams. You can see how they're thick in the middle. They're two beams that meet together in the middle on the real thing. So you could paint it and maybe draw a little pencil line in to show how they lock in. That might be a nice effect. But your two ship's boats go on the top of there. We've got holes there for the bell housing, for the chimney, for the bits around the masts. The low mast locating points are nice and clear. We've got slightly oversized cannonballs on the top there, but they're for the carronades, so they are slightly bigger. But they're so big that they're sort of almost going over the plastic, and you're not seeing them on the plastic. So yeah, and then we've got the opening for the stairs there, and then this is where we put our ship's wheel and the binnacle cabinet and so on. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's quite a long, flimsy part because it's quite thin. It needs a little bit of clean up on the edge. But yeah, nice and simple. The molded detail in there is crisp enough. I mean, it's big chunky bits of wood, so it works fine. Yeah, so it's a good starting point. And then we've got our poop deck here. So we've got a little bit of sink in it, but as we're going to sand these smooth, we can sort that out, so it's not an issue for us. Nice clear holes for our knees for the rear bulkhead there. Yeah, we might want to thin these platforms down a little bit. They're a little bit thick compared to the real thing, but otherwise all good. And we're not going to worry about the sink on that because we put the skylight around there. So yeah, nice simple deck. Quite a bit of work because you've got to scrape the deck and sort it out and get it smooth and sort the sink out. But that's going to be the same with all of these parts. They all need a little bit of work. But yeah, very nice. When you get the kit, like I've said before, you need to wrap everything up. So I'm going to be unwrapping these, showing you re-wrapping them. Wrap everything in tissue paper, then you're getting no more scratches and imperfections. You're not creating work for yourself. Sometimes, if you're like me, you buy a kit, you might not come to it for maybe some years. So it's good to make sure they're protected and then shove a bag of silica gel in there to keep everything nice and dry, and it should be able to store it for a long time. So these are our two ship's boats. So I'm just going to have a look at that. One of the questions we had was, are they the same size? It'd be nice if they were different sizes because the different sizes on the actual ship. And then if we've got a larger one, we can do that one differently. But no, they are the same size, unfortunately. One of them, the Admiral's barge, if you like, has a green little stripe along it. Well, green and gold actually, but at this scale you just do the green, and these should be white. But You could still do that anyway, just to show a difference. You've got no clinker on them. They're completely smooth. If you wanted to put clinker on, it's doable. You do it with layers of masking tape, and you can make that look quite effective. It's time consuming, but because you're working with masking tape, it's not too difficult. So yeah, you can put a clinker on if you like, and we might do that come the time, see what my mood's like. But there's not much in the way of cleanup. You've got some ejector pins in there in the middle, but a gentle sand will remove those. They're not drastic, so there's nothing wrong with those particularly. Next, we've got our stern gallery, and look at the moulding finesse on that. It's really, really nice. The detail, the figures, all the detailed woodwork there, it's really nicely done. Really clear scrolls, easy to pick out with a paintbrush and get all that right. And you've got all these windows. It's just a really lovely piece of moulding. If you're going to depict her a bit more accurately than the kit, then these big holes here need to be filled, because that's the locating points for those posts that you shouldn't have. So quite a bit of filling to go into there, and a little bit of cleanup as well. And with it being right up against that moulding there, you are going to have to be careful. You also want to remove the Victory sign here. That's how she used to be displayed, but it's incorrect. And now if you look at pictures of her more recently, it says Victory in big letters right across the top. So decal thin, but I have a solution for that. We'll talk about that in a separate video. But yeah, this is a really nice piece of work. And what you can do is you can do all that detail painting, glue it in, because the fit should be fairly good actually. And then you can just paint up the edges. Any filling, if you need to do, will be on this edge here. So yeah, you can spend your time detail painting this. Painting in all those balustrades is very delicate work, but it's doable with a little bit of time. So yeah, this is one of the parts that was separated in the bag. I said there wasn't any. But actually there was this and one of the ship's boats I'd forgotten about. So there's a little bit of damage where it's come away from the sprue, but rectifiable. So yeah, a very nice part. Right, we have some of our mast parts next. And if you get a newer kit, you'll have all sorts of issues with huge amounts of sink. I mean, massive amounts of sink in it, in both sides, and distortion, lots and lots of flash, and poor moulding, short shots, and all sorts. But with this older kit, this is lovely and crisp and really, really pleasing to the eye. We've got a little bit of bend in this one. It's quite a long thin part, and you can see it's warped in a couple of directions. We might be able to put a hairdryer on that and straighten that. You know, just pull it tight and with a hairdryer and see if we can correct that. I don't know. If you've got any ideas on how to straighten that, I'm all ears. Please let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, all these parts are nice and clear. I don't even see any sink. There's some ejector pins. Most of them are sunk, so easy to fill, and just sand flush in a couple of cases. So yeah, very, very nicely done. As our yards have got a nice tape. Unfortunately, we've also got ejector pin marks in some of those as well, but a bit of milliput in there, and you can file that to shape and sort that out. That's not a problem. Of course, you could always replace them with wooden ones yourself, but I'd like to try and prove that it can be done with the plastic, to be honest. So other than that one there, which I'm not sure which part that is, everything else is as straight as a die, isn't it? You know, it's just a bit of seam clean up. There's a reasonable amount of seam on these, but yeah, very nice actually. I don't see an issue with that at all. Just some seam clean up, maybe a little bit of thinning of one or two of the parts. See how the part sort of has a sort of diamond shape. You want to just make that go flat. So yeah, again, to do with how they get it out of the tooling. Yeah. For its time, that is really well done. And yeah, you can definitely work with that. More mast parts now, mainly spars, but we do have some of the flag poles, the flag staffs here, and some of the smaller mast parts. None of these appear to have an issue in terms of shape, nice and straight. Again, it's just seam clean up, and you can see how they've put the ejector pins between, which means we don't really have much in the way of ejector pin issues on the parts. There's a couple on these square bases which are raised and can be sanded off. A sunk one there, and then a sunk one on the base of this flagpole. But again, a bit of gentle sanding, a little bit of milliput in there, and no issues at all. So another nice set of parts. Even this this arm here, which is long and thin, doesn't seem to be too bad. I think it's out slightly, but again, we should be able to correct it. And if anyone's got any views on correcting the parts, my usual way is to heat it with a hairdryer and try and straighten it. But if anyone's got any other suggestions that they've tried and they know works, share them in the comments so we can all see. Thank you very much. Our next parts, we've got a whole array of parts. So we've got the bulkheads here for the various captains, officers' quarters, and so on, admiral's cabin and things. So we've got a combination of recessed and raised detail here. So that helps with some of the painting. You've got the panels in nice enough, so you'll be able to paint the panels in. The pillars have got recesses in, so you can pick out the blue and the yellow and stuff really nicely. And they're nice and crisp as well. At this sort of age, all parts need some form of clean up and straightening up, but it's not bad. Then we've got our side gallery windows for the stern gallery there. They're very nicely done. Now you have a little tassel that hangs out of the bottom. It's a carved tassel, and the sprue gate is connecting to the tassel, which is deforming the tassel a little bit, unfortunately. But under paint, it's not really going to be massively noticeable. One thing that doesn't get shouted out in the instructions is the roof of this. The roof of this would be lead, and so it needs to be painted in a lead grey colour. Again, we can deal with all of that come the time. But more detail painting, as with the stern gallery. Yeah, nicely moulded parts actually. Then we've got these parts here. These are quite thick and chunky, and they need a fair amount of clean up because you've got some deforming of the part where they cross. They're sort of deforming, but in actual fact, these are blue and yellow. So you've got basically blue with yellow outlines and stuff. Some of that might be a little bit difficult to do, so you do blue down and then yellow across, and that gives you the sort of the general feel. And you should have some scroll work on there and what have you. Some of it we might be able to do, some of it maybe not so much, but yeah. So ejector pins, big thick chunky ejector pins to clean up as well. So a fair amount of part clean up on these, just straightening things up and squaring things off. But once it's on and you've scraped it out and made it look as it should, you know, the basic shape and everything is correct. And you can get in here and thin these out quite a bit. They're not structural in any way. So these here, you could seriously thin them out, get a rotary tool, take that material down, and that would look really quite nice, I think. I'm not sure. No, that's right. Yeah. These are probably the worst parts we've seen so far for mould related tidy up. Then we've got our rudder. Again, it's lacking a little bit of detail here. It's just one smooth slab, and in reality, each one of those points there where you see a kick out, that would have been the next piece of wood. So you could scribe that in, use a razor saw and put that in, but then you also should have the bottom of this in copper tiles, in line with the copper hull. And if you go to Victory now, you can actually walk under the hull, which is not something you've been able to do before, but you can now walk under the hull, and they've actually got remnants of the original copper tiles still on the rudder. Yeah, I think the rudder is one of the most original bits of the ship. Actually, which, you know, when you consider it spent most of its life in the water, is quite an achievement, I think. Testament to the copper tiling. Then we've got our figurehead here, which with just my reading glasses on, looks very small. But you can see we've got the two figures on there. You can see that there's lots and lots of detail on there, so we should be able to do some nice painting with that. There's a bit of flash to clean off. But yeah, the coat of arms, the crown, and what have you that's on there all looks like it's there. So you'll have to get your magnifying glasses on. But yeah, we can do something with that. Then for me, the worst parts of the kit are these, the dead eyes. The plates that they go on need a lot of tidy up. You've got raised lines where you've got the location pins, which is a shame, so that needs tidying up. You've got a thick seam that runs along where these are, and these should be chains really, so you might be able to replace it with thin chain, but I'm not sure that it'd look right. They're sort of, I said chains, they're sort of like long metal loops, so we might be able to replace those with some copper wire or something, but I'd want to make them and check that I could do it first before I remove these. Otherwise, you're just scraping the seam off. But the dead eyes, they don't look brill. What you've got is a complete flat surface, and then you've got the three ropes on there. So I have got some aftermarket coming which should replace and upgrade these, which I think is desperately needed. We could use wooden dead eyes, but at this scale, finding them small enough might be problematic. But there you go, that is our parts there. Other than lots and lots of tidy up, there's nothing wrong with them, it's all good. Really nice, crisp parts. There's a little bit of flash, and there's some ejector pins that we need to sort out in places, but nothing major. We've got the carronades on the end. They need drilling out, but otherwise they look great. For some reason, we seem to have wheels on one but not on the other, so not quite sure why that is. Cannons are nice and crisply moulded, a little bit of seam clean up, but other than that, no problem. Again, you'll have to just drill them out, or maybe use an awl to centre punch them. And then our trucks, a little bit of flash in places, but other than that, it's just seam removal. There is a raised ejector pin in all of them, but when you put the cannon on, you ain't going to see them, so I'd leave them. And then our anchors are nice, they look great, right shape and everything, will sit into there nicely. When it comes to your anchor, just check puddinged anchor rings. These should all be puddinged, and that means they're wrapped in a tarred black rope, and then there's little sections with a white rope on as well for helping hauling it and moving it. So check your references, because that should be a combination of black and white, that ring. And then the top of the ship's boats, really nice and crisp, a little bit of flash, but the detail is lovely, and we've got little gaps for the oars so they look the part. That's a really nice set of parts. Every part on this needs some clean up, so don't think this is going to be a quick build. It's going to have to be a labour of love, and you're going to have to spend your time on each part, making each one a model in its own right. Our stand, no major issues with this. Little bit of clean up to do, a bit of flash, and the sprue gate at the back, at both ends actually. So this comes loose in the box, so you don't have to do anything other than clean it up. But there's no sink in it. It's a nice shape, very, very usable. I think the pins that go in there have big ejector pin marks in, as I remember, so you have to sort that out. But otherwise, yeah, stand's a stand, isn't it? Next tree of parts, and we've got, again, quite an eclectic mix. So if we start at this end, we've got our nameplate, which stands alone, has a little bracket on the back there, which will prop into the stand quite well. If I show you, you can put it on the stand and it sort of fits quite nicely on there. But it's got nice acrylic writing on it, just needs a little bit of tidy up. But there's no mention of Airfix or a scale or anything like that, so it's a really nice name plaque that is very, very usable. The raised lettering is nicely raised, so it's easy to paint, and the acrylic writing, I think, adds a little bit of flair to it. Then we've got this forward bulkhead, which has got the correct round windows. You'd be amazed how many times I see those as elliptical. On a number of models, they're elliptical. They should be round, and they are on the Airfix kit. So, well done, Airfix. There is some flash there. That needs a bit of cleaning up very carefully. Getting in there will be tricky, but you're going to have to get in there and scrape those parts clean. And then you've got all sorts of colours going on this, because in between the posts there, the pillars, should be yellow. Is that right? Sorry, should be blue. Then the pillars are yellow with blue inners. The top work is yellow, and then everything from this line above is black, and then the very tops of these bits that jut out with the door in, they should be lead. So there's lots of different colours going on here, and then you've got black hinges, so a lot of detail paintwork to do there. Then we've got this, which is quite plugged up. You need to look at a way of replacing that in some way, maybe scratch build your own or something, yeah, or sand it thinner and see if you can open it out. So you should be able to see through the grating. So the grating's all right on one side, but you can't see through it. You can see through the top bit a bit better. So thinning it out might just help that. Then we've got the posts that hang out of the back, so we can ignore those. We won't be using them. Then we've got our spotting tops for the three masts. Slightly different arrangements on all of them. They need a little bit of tidy up, as do all the parts. And then underneath, we've got some ejector pins that we're going to have to get rid of. And then possibly, depending on how motivated you are, you could scribe some individual plank lines underneath, because it's made up of a load of planks. But you're looking down on the model, you're not really going to see it. So you might, if you don't, you're not spoiling anything. Then we've got the oars, which they look okay, especially from this angle, but with a bit of detail painting they could look quite good, because they're white, but they have a different coloured handle, and I think the tip of the oar, the blade of the oar, is a different colour as well, but don't hold me to that, check your references. I could be mixing that up with something else. Then we've got our metal railings, which go along the side of the ship, and these all look nice. It's a decent sized rail. It's not over scale or anything. Needs a little bit of clean up, but otherwise it's good. It's not deformed or anything like that. But you need to check your references, because all along the edges there is netting where you put the hammocks in, which acts as another form of defence when she's in battle. So you've got all these hammock nets that run along the side. So do check your references before you commit to doing some of these things. Then we've got the they do have a name. I forget what they're called. I wanted to say cross trees, but I don't think that's right. But I'll probably remember when I finish the video. But yeah, they go in. They actually look not bad at all. Just a bit of seam removal, and they're good to go. And then we've got more dead eyes and plates. This one's a little bit bent, but not too bad. We could always replace it with plastic card and some metal rod or something. One of them's a little bit damaged, but I'm not going to worry about that because I intend to replace. But very nice detailed parts, will look very authentic once built up. Even if you're fairly novel at it and all you're going to do is clean the parts up, they are going to look really special when done. Next tree of parts, we've got all of the ladders that are used throughout the build there. They've interestingly, rather than putting them in a frame, because they'd put them on a tree, you've got a connection sprue gate at one end, and then at the other end you've got the number. So you've got to double the amount of cleanup, which is nice of them, isn't it? So yeah, you're going to have to get in there and scrape even the steps. You can see they look pretty uneven as you look through them. So the back end of the moulding needs tidying up and sand off that ejector pin mark. These are the ones that go up to the poop deck, and yeah, they are quite chunky. So you might want to thin them down a little bit. There's our hose pipe openings. The shape of all that is correct. Cat heads. Very nicely done. All looks correct as well. Then we've got our, well, these are our entrances for the side of the ship's hull. I didn't notice those in the instructions. Again, you're not going to be able to detail paint this, but it's got all sorts of detail on there. They're quite grand openings on the side of the ship with all sorts of gold and red and all sorts on there. So, and scroll work and things, but and again the top of these would be lead, so they'd be lead grey, not black, which I commonly see done as a mistake. Then we've got the top of the bell tower. Again, this wouldn't be black, it would be lead. And then we've got, all right, this is our skylight for the poop deck there, with individual windows in to paint in. So the best way of doing that is probably to paint the thing black, and then whatever your chosen colour is for the glass, whether it be blue or grey or what have you, or maybe even just gloss, just a little spot in each one, and let it fill the area and do it that way, because it's a little bit, the detail's not quite raised enough for dry brushing, to be honest. And then we've got more, these will be to go off the spotting tops, more dead eyes. Again, chunky, clunky, you can clean them up and they'll look okay, but they really want replacing if you can. And we'll talk about that in a separate video when we look at the aftermarket. Otherwise, more parts that once cleaned up are perfectly nice and usable. Well, these parts just keep coming, don't they? This is not a small build or a quick build. This will take some time, especially if you want to do it properly and get the very best out of it. Lots of parts here. So these two pieces are parts of the stand, and you can see ejector pins need dealing with. Then we've got the knees that go up against the rear bulkhead there, Again, ejector pins. Feels like they most of them can be sanded out. There's a couple that are recessed. Then we've got the pillars for between the decks. They're lovely and crisp. Those much better than what you get if you get the new version of it. Then we've got the lanterns. Bit of flash there, seem clean up. And again, there's raised detail on there, but it's not raised enough to do anything with. So a little bit of careful detail painting. Unfortunately, we've got a little bit of sink in one of them as well. So, yeah, have to have a look at that come the time. Then we've got what have we got here? We've got some bits. We've got ship's boats rudders. They would be stowed inside the boat when she was stowed. So I'd be tempted not to put them on as per the instructions, but to pop them inside with the oars. Ship's wheels, they look okay. Bit of clean up on the mating surfaces, but otherwise it's a nice, very detailed little part actually. You've got little shapes to the spokes there, and like I say, a little bit of string around that, make it look really authentic. Your case for the binnacle and various navigation equipment, that could be better. The forward face has got raised windows. Well, they should actually be countersunk because it's glass within a frame. But I suppose if you paint them up, it'll look right. Then you've got this little bit that sticks out the top, which should be copper. But the rest of it is wood, brown wood. There's nothing at the back or the sides, and it's probably not too thin. It's about right. It looked a bit thin on the instructions, but it's about right. But you should have glazing all around, so you might want to just emulate some painting in some windows all the way around, though you're not likely to see behind it because it's slightly just under the deck. And then you've got this butting up to it. So maybe you won't see it, I don't know. Test fit it, make a decision. Then we've got bits. They're all nice and clear. A little bit of ejector pin clean up to do, but nothing major. Yeah, there's a number of filling sessions needed for this. Then we've got the rails for the spotting tops. They're nice and crisp. Just get rid of the ejector pins and you're good. There's the bell there, I nearly missed that. Again, it's just seam clean up and ejector pin filling. This is our posts for the ship's wheel. And there's a little boss there, which if you paint that gold, it stands out against the black, and that's not too far off. Or gold with a tiny black spot in the middle, even better. Then we've got our chimney, more bits and brackets for those, which they're probably a little bit overscale, but they're not bad at all. Personally, I'd be using them, but some modelers might want to replace that with a bit of wire, and I could understand that. And then you've got more of these blocks. These are the ones that stick out the side. Again, not correct, so don't use them. Which saves you a little bit of clean up, doesn't it? Now, when you get the kit, you get a number of these runs of parts, and they're all attached with a great big chunky piece of sprue at the end of the tree there. I just remove them so that you can store them better in the box, and as you've seen, everything's wrapped in tissue paper. So this would be like 3 strips of parts, and they're all over the place and a bit twisted, and stop them clashing into each other. When you get your kit, just nip them off so you've got nice, easy to manage runs, and you can keep them separate. As you can see, this one has all our gunpoint openings on, and you do have different styles. You've got some which have got a little raised elliptical loop on them, and others that don't. So they are different numbers, so bear that in mind, because they're also probably different sizes. On the inside, every single one of them has an ejector pin. Now, they are a bit chunky, so what you could do to save yourself a lot of pain is you could run some sandpaper or something along these and thin them out and get rid of that ejector pin and give yourself something that has a more authentic look. Now, these, not too thin, these things were quite chunky. They would sit in, you'd have a gun port opening that was maybe that thick, and then your gun port lid would be perhaps that thick, and you've got quite a cavity. You also need to think about whether you're going to put the opening ropes on them or not. There's one for each corner, so 2 on each one, and then that's how they pull them up. They pull on the ropes from the inside, which opens up and lifts up the lid, basically. So you can put those on, or you can choose not to because of the scale. Up to you. I would say stretch sprue or a little bit of copper wire, thin copper wire or something like that, so you can cut a load of them into the right size and just glue them into place rather than trying to thread anything. I think that would make much more sense. But they're nice and crisply moulded. Yes, there's some flash, and yes, there's some seam, and they all need to be cleaned up and what have you. But what you can do is you can cut through each one of these points here, so you've got 2 on a little bit of sprue, and that makes them easy to hold while you're cleaning them up. Don't try and clean them up after you've cut them off the sprue. And then you can paint them all up. You'll have a black front cover and then red at the back and at the sides there, a real vibrant crimson red. And then when you've done all of that, you paint in the black metal hinges. So couple of afternoons of work just sorting that out, I think. But the rewards will show for themselves. You spend a good amount of time cleaning them up, detail painting them, they will look terrific. Right, this is the last sprue, so the only thing to look at after this is the hulls. So, you know, we're nearly through the parts. And there's been lots of them, a lot more than you would think possibly. These are all the various cannons that stick out of the side of the hull. They are lovely and crisply moulded. Again, not like what you get if you buy the current vintage classic run. They've all got a hole in the end. So there's no drilling out required. They're all done and they're all nicely in the centre. It's a thing of beauty. So they have your connection point. You're going to have to be very, very careful. Cut it well away from the part and gently file and sand it into shape. If you cut too close to it, you're going to be cutting little flat edges on all of them and it's going to ruin the appearance. So these need to be removed very carefully. I mean, these days you'd have the sprue gate on that back end probably. But it is what it is. You can't undo what they did back in '65. All you can do is make good. So they are different numbers. It's not necessarily always clear where that number starts and finishes. So be very careful and make sure you know how many you've got of each. So they're on both sides. So 201, for example, is both sides all the way down, and then somewhere here it will change, and the change is subtle, so slightly thicker. I mean, as I look at these, they all look the same. So, but you can see that some of them are a little bit thicker, but it is subtle. So you need to do some counting. I think what I'd probably do is cut the sprues into their number sections first, and then when we come to clean them up, we've already got them separated correctly so we don't mix them up. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with those parts. They'll be easy to use. Probably need a little bit of a sand at the back to get any flash off so they fit nice and flush and square and straight. But otherwise, not bad at all. Considering its age, I think this kit's stood up well. At this time, this was produced, the tooling would have been about 10 years old, so we'd still expect it to be fairly crisp. But, you know, there's a nice level of detail in all of these parts, isn't there? Let's have a look at the hull. So our hull comes in two halves, they mirror each other, and the level of detail on here is really nice. And again, if you get the newer release, some of this gets more and more soft and disappears a little bit. So do try and find an older kit, don't get one of the newer releases. Now, there is some pluses and there's some minuses to consider with the hull. So I'm just going to show you this one half because they are exactly the same. The plus is the level of detail is really, really nice. You've got, you can see all the planking. You'd certainly argue that it's probably a little bit thick and overdone, but it's there and it gives you an impression. And when you've painted it, it'll look fine. You'll get the right impression. You've got the bits in which are nicely done, and there's no short shops or anything like that, so just carefully cleaning that up, and that'll be nice. You've got some openings that are already moulded in closed, so you can paint those up as well. You've got a little bit of filling to do where we've got those booms that come out that need to be replaced. But the scroll work's all on there, and it's nice and it's clear, and it will look good under paint. It'll look really nice. And the same on the bow there. We've got the scroll work for the figurehead moulded in. All looks nice. We've got the openings there for roping the bow sprit, so you can do that properly, and that'll look great as well. So yeah. Really, really nice. Then we come down to here and we come to the whale, which is this strip here, and you can see the woodwork on there. It is beautiful. You've got the nails, which would have been big wooden pegs. That's all raised detail. It's really nice. Yeah. So that looks really, really good, and you'll have to be careful on your cleanup not to damage any of that. And then get that under plate, and it looks really nice. And we've got our steps up the side there and our opening for getting into the ship. All good, nice and crisply moulded. They've got the correct doors on there and everything, and easy to locate your stern gallery parts because they've blanked them out for you. Now on the actual ship, at the time of Trafalgar, this was steeper and more squared off. So it didn't have this slope down along the poop deck. It was steeper and went across. So as she's depicted now with hammock cages on is incorrect. It's actually the side of the ship, the bulwark comes up higher. So I might have a go at sorting that come the time. In fairness to Airfix, that wasn't known at the time they made this tooling, so you know, and I don't believe they've modified it during the restoration. They've left it as it was, but there is also some lovely copper tiling. Now, when you lay copper tiles, they overlap like roof tiles, and they have accurately depicted that on here, and it does look really, really nice. So you've got from start to finish, you've got that, and it follows the curve round of the waterline, and you've got the overlap here, so it's all correct and looks great. But then they've dropped a little bit of a blooper, because this here has some lovely wooden planking detail on, and so does the keel here. A little bit of damage where they've taken it off, but we can just sand that out. But the keel also has some raised wood detailing, and that's unfortunate because the keel should be copper plated as well. That copper plating should come round, should follow the line of this and go round. So on the instructions, they correctly tell you to paint this copper, but on the actual part, they've depicted it as wooden planking, which is a shame. And they've done the same here at the stern. The copper should follow on this stern post here, and it doesn't, although it does a bit lower down. So you're not going to do anything with it. It is what it is, but it all needs to be painted in copper. That's the only mistake I've seen so far. well, it's the only mistake I've seen altogether. Otherwise, for its age and the complexity of the shape, the moulding on this is absolutely stunning. They did a really, really good job. Yeah, so there's a little bit of sort of levelling stuff up and cleaning up as we've seen throughout the kit. That's the theme. But otherwise, this is really nice. You've got the planking shape is correct and everything. So a really nice kit. Let's sum it up, shall we? So there we have it. Airfix's classic kit HMS Victory. As classic Airfix kits go, you don't get much more classic than this. There are a number of kits in their classic range that you'd say are absolutely stalwart kits that you've got to build. And for me, everyone should have one of these. Absolutely everyone should have one of these. But if you are thinking, you know what, I'd love to build this, it's not too big. It's not like getting the Hella 1100 one, which is, you know, nearly a metre long. This doesn't take up too much space. It's very, very detailed. It's very, very accurate for the time it was produced. And it will certainly look really good when you've got it on display. You've got lots and lots, I mean, hours and hours of work in this. Not just because you've got to clean up every part and make it good. There's a lot of detail painting to do. The rigging is going to take you some time as well. There is no rigging blocks supplied with this, so you're just threading from point to point, but at this scale that'll look fine. You've got the flags to put on, you've got the sails to put on if you wish, and things that you need to do with the sails to make them look right. Add all of these tie downs and what have you, all the lashings to go on. Lots of nice painting to do to make it really, really sing. And you know, you could then even go further and weather it if you wanted, which is not what I would do with it. But yeah, I think it's a beautiful kit. It was well thought out at the time with lots and lots of detail. There are definitely some building challenges to this. Now, they don't have a skill level on this, but using Airfix's skill level, I would say it was a skill level 4. Not because it's going to be hard to build, but because some of the painting in here is going to be very, very skilled painting. Doing the lanterns and bits and pieces like that is going to take a lot of time, a steady hand and a lot of concentration. But the rewards will speak for themselves. You'll have something that is absolutely stunning. Now, what I would say, and I've said this throughout the video, and I said this at the start, is if you want one of these, do not buy the current release because you will regret it, I promise you. What you need to do is find as old a version, complete, unstarted as you can, and get one of those. One of the helping things is if it's in black plastic, it tends to be earlier and therefore sharper. If it's in this sort of buff brown, avoid it because that tends to be newer. So for me, old is the way to go. I think it's a stunning kit. I'm looking forward to building it and seeing just how much I can improve on it from when I did it as a teenager. I know that many of you will have built this before, maybe started it and never got too far with it, or like me, just built the plastic bits and didn't do the more complicated because it was beyond my skill set at the time. If so, this is definitely a memory lane build, and it'd be interesting to challenge ourselves and just see how far have you come with your modelling skill as you've got older. If you've never built this, where have you been? Get one, build one, because it's a beautiful, beautiful kit. It's one of my favourite tall ship kits of all time. So there you go. You now know what you get in the box. There's a lot of parts in there. There's even more work in there, but it will be worth it, I promise you. It's a beautiful kit. Hope that was helpful. You enjoy your modelling. Take care, and I will see you very soon. Bye for now.